Oregon football got some good news on the recruiting front. Five-star quarterback Jayden Rashada has pushed back his commitment date. Why that might be good news for the Ducks in terms of his pursuit. And a very Friday fun question today. What would the Oregon football team look like if they had to put a starting five on the basketball court, a 4x100 relay team together, and a golf roster out there? Let's find out. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster and lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. Thanks for making this your first listen or your first view if you're watching on YouTube of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching this show. I appreciate all of you who have done so already. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them that Locked On sent you. So it hasn't actually been announced by Jayden himself, but, I mentioned that last weekend I was at the OT7 camp in Vegas, so the 7-on-7 tournament that is, and I had a chance to, ask some questions to and talk with Jayden Rashada a little bit. And I said he seemed very uncertain about, this was my takeaway, because a lot of times guys will say one thing, but you kind of get the inclination they know and they just don't want to say what they're actually feeling. But I really got the sense that he was not sure about where he wanted to go to school. He threw out the possibility of, he's going to wait and see and maybe push back his commitment. And the reports are that that's going to happen. Now, he hasn't announced that himself, but sources close to him have said that he's going to push back his commitment instead of, picking a school this Saturday, the 18th of June. That would be tomorrow for those of you listening to this episode the day that it drops on Friday. And he's pushing it back to sometime later next week or even maybe the following week, like 8 to 10 days after he was originally scheduled to, right? There's been all this build up to June 18th because that's the date he had set, but it looks like he's going to push that back. Now, again, it hasn't come from Jayden himself, so maybe the sources around him are incorrect, but I've talked to people who I trust that know people who know yada, yada, yada. I believe he's going to push that back. So let's operate under that assumption right now. That's good news for Oregon. What John Garcia, director of recruiting for Sports Illustrated and a weekly guest here on Locked On Ducks, has said is that if other schools are able to have more time to talk to him, that is going to be good news for Oregon and Miami specifically, whereas LSU, Texas A&M, and Florida, I think Florida is seen as the leader right now, but all of those schools that are squarely in the mix are going to be able to get another opportunity to either get him on campus. He has one official visit left, but also just to talk to him, to sell him on their vision more, give him more time to think and, put your name in his head as much as you can. Think not in a bad way, but, talk to him about why you think he should come to your school. So that's the good news. But a question came in from a user on Twitter. This was, I think it was Frosty Dog Gaming. Let me double check because I want to give credit where credit's due, and I appreciate everybody who sends in mailbag questions via Twitter, hashtag AskLODPod, or at Smalls_55, or at Locked On Ducks. All ways that you can contact me, ask a question. Yeah, Frosty Dog Gaming at hashtag LRock, whatever that means, but seen him before. Appreciate it, man. He said, so if Jayden Rashada commits to Oregon, how will it affect things with Thompson and Jay Butterfield? And if Bo Nix decides to stay for the 2023 season. So let's talk about the Oregon quarterback room beyond this year, because I think we know what it's going to look like for this season. Let's start with Bo Nix, which I think is a really fascinating situation because for those of you who don't know, because of the COVID year, he's got 2 years of eligibility left if he wants to use them. He doesn't have to, but he can if he wants to. So he could be Oregon's quarterback for the next 2 years. I think that would only take place if things were going pretty well. I don't think if it went super poorly that he would, necessarily feel that inclined to stick around, though maybe he would. Maybe he just feels that he would need another year in the system, but we hope that that is not the situation that we're going to be dealing with here. But the question of whether or not he'd be back for a second season, I think depends on how the 2022 season goes. And I think there's one of three directions that it could go for Bo Nix. If it goes super, super well, he completes mid 60s, couple thousand yards, 3 or 4 to 1 touchdown interception ratio. By the way, this past year, Auburn, before he got hurt, he was 11 to 3 in the touchdown interception ratio department. Just saying, just bet most of you didn't know that, because the narrative around him is that he turns the ball over a ton, which has been a problem in his career, but he was much better about it till he got hurt this past year with the Tigers. But I think if it goes super, super well, he has a great statistical season. He looks really good. He might want to try his hand at the NFL. He might want to go to the league. And would he be a starter? No, but could I see a team taking a flyer on him in like the 4th or 5th round? Yeah, maybe. I mean, he's 6'5", he's really mobile, he's got a big arm. If he shows that he can be a more refined passer, I could absolutely see him getting drafted. I mean, Anthony Brown made a practice squad, at least, got signed as an undrafted free agent with the Baltimore Ravens. I think Bo Nix is a better quarterback and is overall more talented than Anthony Brown in more ways than one. So I think he certainly has that possibility, and I'm sure that he's got his eye on the league in that sense. Let's say it goes super poorly, right? And Oregon, super well is Bo Nix does well statistically. Oregon wins 10, 11, 12 games or so, has a really good year on the national stage, plays in some big-time games, performs in those. I think that would raise his NFL draft stock. I don't know exactly what it is right now. I can't imagine it's too high, but that would at least raise it a little bit. So maybe he would want to capitalize on that momentum and go to the league. If this year goes super poorly, however, maybe he doesn't want to stick around to Oregon again and decides, this isn't the right spot for me. I want to, find that perfect right situation. And there's a school that I think is going to be really good. And maybe he becomes a grad transfer and is immediately eligible to transfer once again, as he was this past year when he went from Auburn to Oregon, and he finds another place that he believes is the right fit. I think that's the least likely of these three scenarios, because the other one is that, it goes pretty well. Not super great, but not super terrible. Oregon's a solid team. They do about what we're hoping to. Maybe they get back to the Pac-12 championship game. Bo Nix looks pretty good, and he comes back for another year. I think that those are all three very reasonable scenarios, and at this point in time, hard to tell what the most likely of those is going to be. And, if things go just okay, maybe Oregon is a 9-win team, or they underperform a little bit, and Bo Nix is solid but not exemplary, but he's not terrible, and he's just kind of in the middle. That'd be a little bit of a guessing game. But his options are, after the season, grad transfer, NFL, or come back to Oregon. And I think it'll depend on how that season goes, but that will certainly be influencing the quarterback room, because if he sticks around for another season, a guy like Ty Thompson or Jay Butterfield might go elsewhere. Now, Jayden Rashada or maybe even Dante Moore fit into that mix as well. I'll tell you how, but first I'll remind you, this episode brought to you by Bet Online, your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's NBA championship matchup with the Celtics and the Warriors, NHL Hockey Conference Finals, Major League Baseball, go Mariners, and of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. So if Oregon's able to get one of these big-time quarterback commits, I don't know that would push Bo Nix to go one way or the other. I think his decision is going to be made based on how he performs in this upcoming season. However, if he struggles mightily and Oregon brings in a Jayden Rashada or a Dante Moore, it could start to have him looking in the rearview mirror, because maybe the Oregon staff decides they don't like Bo Nix as much, and they, aren't as content on making him the starting quarterback no matter what. And they're more willing to go with one of the younger guys, being Butterfield or Thompson or whatever quarterback commit Oregon gets in the class of 2023, and they see who looks best at the time. But tying this back to Jayden Rashada, who, I don't think Oregon is a leader for at this point in time, doesn't mean they can't get him, because at this point in Josh Connerly's recruitment, Oregon was not going to be the team whose hat he put on in that signing day moment, but it ultimately was. So you never know. But if Rashada ends up coming to the Ducks, in the class of 2023 with the sort of player that he is, the caliber of schools that he is, caliber of player that, I saw over the weekend, big time arm, needs to work on his accuracy a little bit, but he's got great physical traits as well. I think he's got some good intangibles. He's very competitive, and I really like that about him. And I was impressed with how he handled himself as well. Not quite on the level of Dante Moore, but again, both really impressive young guys. I think one of Ty Thompson or Jay Butterfield would transfer. I think it's a very reasonable expectation. Which one? Depends on where they are on the depth chart. I think those are conversations that would have to be had with Kenny Dillingham and Dan Lanning between the quarterbacks about where they are on the depth chart and where their playing time projects to be. But I think if Oregon does end up landing one of these guys, and Avery Johnson, I think would make it less likely that one of them would transfer before the 2023 season, because he's not as refined of a thrower. So he's a little bit more, he's the best athlete of all of them, and he's going to be on campus this weekend. But I think that when you look at these three quarterbacks that Oregon's going after, Jayden Rashada, Dante Moore, and Avery Johnson, if you get either Moore or Rashada, then you're probably going to have one of these guys transfer because they'll just see it as, competition that they don't necessarily have to face, and playing time that might be taken away from them that they could otherwise find at another school. But if it's Avery Johnson, I think they would see that as someone who they could both, be above, and Johnson might have to wait a little bit longer because he's a great athlete, but he's not quite as refined as a thrower at this point in time. He's not bad by any stretch, but he's not at the level of Moore or Rashada right now. And so I think if he was there behind Butterfield and Thompson, then you would have those two, I think, more likely to stay at Oregon. But then you have to ask about what's going to happen with Bo Nix, because, Butterfield and Thompson are not going to be the starters this year, barring an injury to Bo Nix, which has happened before. I'm not rooting for that. Of course, I want Bo Nix to become the greatest player in the history of college football and lead Oregon to a national championship. That's not going to happen, but that's what I'd like to happen. I want somebody to do it. Almost had it with Marcus. But anyway, so I think that when you look at the room going into 2023, which of those guys, Ty Thompson or Jay Butterfield, is able to separate himself from the other in a way that, and also improve to the point where, if Bo Nix is back, the Oregon coaching staff has to seriously consider one of them as the starting quarterback, right? And all of this, again, back to what I started the show with, is dependent on how Bo Nix performs in the 2022 season. Because if he comes out and he lights it up, but he makes it very clear he wants to come back to Oregon for a second season, heck, I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility if both Ty Thompson and Jay Butterfield transfer, because they might not want to sit behind Bo Nix again and, wait on a potential injury, which I know neither guy is going to be rooting for, because they're both good dudes and they both know Bo Nix and work with him on a daily basis nowadays. Not now because they're on summer break, obviously, but you know what I mean. So I think that there's a pretty good chance one would transfer. I think the only way you keep both, Butterfield and Thompson, is if none of Avery Johnson, Dante Moore, and Jayden Rashada end up coming to Oregon. I think that's the only way you could keep both. But given the timeline that they're on and that they're in the same class, I just feel like at some point one of them is going to break off. I don't have an inclination of which one of them it's going to be, and how that could all play out, or what the determining factors would be in that sense. Thompson was such a highly sought after recruit. Maybe he doesn't want to sit behind Bo Nix for another year, whereas Butterfield, who was a pretty highly rated 4-star, but not at the level of Ty Thompson, certainly did not have as much hype. Maybe Butterfield's a little bit more willing to wait his turn in the long haul, the way that Tyler Shuck did behind Justin Herbert, and then get his chance to start. Shuck wasn't able to, take the reins and really establish himself as QB1, as we all saw. But maybe Butterfield's waiting to play the long game more than Ty Thompson. Again, I haven't talked to either of them at any point, so I don't know that. I'm just throwing out hypotheticals here about how all of these things could play out, because there's a lot of different directions, frankly, that this quarterback room could go. And I think it's a fascinating thing to follow, because we don't know everything that we need to know, but that's kind of how I see it playing out. You have to wait and see how Bo Nix does this year and gauge his NFL interest, because if he does pretty well and decides he wants to go to the league, then Butterfield and Thompson have to be looking at it as, okay, open competition between you and me and, whatever young guy they bring in. But I don't think that they could be worried about that because a true freshman, even one as talented as Jayden Rashada or Dante Moore, I don't think is going to be able to do enough right away to just surpass Jay Butterfield and Ty Thompson, who will have had a year in the system, who have had, more reps at the college level. Not a lot of playing time, going into that 2023 season, potentially, if there's a QB battle there. But I just think that you have to wait and let that stuff play out. But I appreciate the question. That one came from Frosty Dog Gaming. Keep them coming. Again, hashtag AskLODPod, or you can just DM me or tweet at me at LockedOnDucks or at Smalls_55. You can see it down there on YouTube. You can also hop in the YouTube comments, drop a question. I check those daily, and I respond to you as well. So if you put a question in there that I think is worthy of fully exploring here on the show, I will do that. And during the summer months especially, more than happy to answer all your questions, but that will be the case once the season rolls around as well, because I know you've got them, and I'm here to answer them at all times. And I absolutely love doing the show, and I love the engagement that we get there. Speaking of fan engagement, this is going to be a very, very fun segment. I did put some real thought into this because that's just what I do here, right? Whether or not you ask a silly question or a serious question or something that's kind of in the middle, I want to have fun with it. I'm going to give it the full run through, and I'm going to give it my full undivided attention. And Brian Goff wants to know what the best starting 5 basketball team, 4x100 track relay team, and golf foursome from the current football roster would be. I tell you what, that is a unique and creative question there. I'll tell you my answers after I remind you this episode brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure pointless or intimidating questioning when you could just save time and money using Rock Auto, a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They have everything you could need, from brake parts to tail lamps to motor oil and even new carpet. They've got it all. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck, right? Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, let's close with our fun segment of the day. I love doing these fun segments. So let's start with basketball. And again, this is all football players on the roster. I am including true freshmen in the class of 2022 commits. That those guys 100% count. So at point guard, we'd be running a little bit small ball here. It is not going to be a big lineup, and you might think that's going in the other direction. Like, oh, football's got a bunch of big guys. Football has a bunch of big guys. They don't have a bunch of tall guys. Okay, Thibodeau's a really tall player, right? 6'5". In basketball, that's what we'd call a small forward. So little bit like the Golden State Warriors here. This would be a small ball lineup, but as I record this, the Dubs are up 3-2 in the series. We'll see if they close it out later tonight. Is Game 6 of the NBA Finals with one of the best broadcasters of all time, by the way, Mike Breen. Oh, gosh, that guy is unbelievably good. Anyway, at point guard, we would have Treyjohn Williams, the 4-star safety commit from Jefferson High School in the state of Oregon. He played basketball there as well. That was one thing I was heavily weighing when thinking about, like, oh, am I going to put him in the lineup, or am I just going to put him in because of size or athleticism? But Treyjohn Williams actually played at Jefferson, so two-sport athlete there. Pretty easy decision. He's about 6'1", so got that prototypical, like, nice point guard size. A little bit taller, I think, than like a Peyton Pritchard, but not as tall as a Will Richardson, perhaps. But I think that Treyjohn at point guard, that was a pretty easy pick. Next, shooting guard, Kyler Casper. It's a big body shooting guard, right? But you got to be tall at every position if you're not going to be super tall in the front court. But Casper, a guy who just has such great athleticism, and I believe he played basketball as well. And at 6, he's 6'4", 6'5". Let me look specifically here. But he's got some size to him. So you put him on the wing. Talking about the Dubs, yeah, he's 6'5". Maybe he is kind of a Klay Thompson kind of player as well. And he did play basketball in high school as well. So again, I like that sort of size there on the wing. Now at small forward, I've got Bo Nix. I don't think he played basketball in high school. Maybe he did. You can hop in the YouTube comments and correct me if I'm wrong there. But you got to put Bo Nix in the starting lineup because he's just a darn good athlete. Even if he doesn't give you a ton at the offensive end, I feel like his leadership on the court would be huge, and he could be a defensive leader because he's just such a good athlete, right? I mean, if you've seen him run, he's got a good frame, really quick feet, good straight line speed. He seems like the sort of guy who could give you a chase down block once every 4 games. So we slot him in at small forward. At power forward, we've got the new offensive line recruit, Josh Connerly, who played basketball in high school, big body, right? And again, not super tall, but knows how to move, very agile. And I think that him paired with the guy I've got starting at center, and that's our tight end Maliki Matavau, who's 6'6", 240 pounds, because got to have some kind of big body out there. And Matavau is about the best combination of height and weight that I could find on the roster. I think if you have those two up there, it's going to be really tough to move them around. Connerly hopefully can step out and shoot a little bit, stretch the floor a touch, but I think it'd be a very defensively oriented team. And I think with those athletes on there, you'd be pretty darn good. So point guard, Treyjohn Williams out there with Kyler Casper in the backcourt. Bo Nix at small forward. Josh Connerly is playing a big boy 4. And then Maliki Matavau is the tight end at the 5. Again, might be a defensive specialist. Treyjohn might have to do all the scoring, and Kyler might have to do, the rest of it. But if that's the way it is, then you just got to work with what you got. So that's the basketball team of Oregon football. Let's go to the track. Actually, no, we'll close with track. Next, we're doing golf. Now, actually, I changed my mind. I want to close with golf because that's my favorite and save the best one for last. Let's do the 4x100 track relay team. Sorry, there's a little gnat in here. That's why my hand is just like here, going like that. For those of you watching on YouTube, 4x100 track relay team. These are the speedsters, and this is just kind of a good thing to know for reference in terms of how the roster is shaping out and where the fastest guys are. Easiest first pick here is Jalil Tucker, the incoming freshman cornerback from Lincoln High School in San Diego. In high school, he ran track, and he ran a 10.53 100-meter dash. Go look at other football players who ran track, or just track times in general. There's this video out there of Jalil Tucker running a track race. Not a fair fight. It's not a fair fight. He is pulling way away from everybody. That is definitely my anchor leg of the 4x100 team, because I think you're supposed to put your fastest guy last. I could be wrong, but I'm putting him as in the anchor spot. Right behind him, however, this is a name that's not really getting that much hype on the Oregon football recruiting trail when you look at the class of 2022 commits, because Florence and Connerly were down to USC and Oregon and ended up choosing the Ducks, of course. And this is a guy from Lincoln, Nebraska, who's a linebacker, by the way, by the name of Devin Jackson. If I told you that his 100-meter dash time was 1/100th of a second slower than Jalil Tucker, who's a corner, you might be pretty impressed with that. I think going forward, Devin Jackson, I think he could be a really special player. You don't see that sort of speed from a linebacker very often. You just don't. So he's on there. Putting Seven McGee in the mix as well. I mean, speed is everything he does. He runs a 4.68 40-yard dash, which is slower than I thought. I bet you by the time he finishes college, he could run a faster 40 time than that. I think he's got that sort of speed. Maybe just needs to get in the weight room a little bit, build up his leg muscles. And then a little bit faster than him, at least in a 40-yard dash perspective, is I've got Dante Thornton, right? 6'5". He's got a 4.63 40 time, which, again, I think he could improve that and get it under 4.6, but he's got those big, long strides. I think the potential there is really, really good. So the 4x100 team for Oregon football, you got Jalil Tucker, Devin Jackson, Seven McGee, and Dante Thornton. Last but certainly not least, the golf foursome that I would throw out there as the most talented players. This is, when I say complete guessing game, I mean a complete guessing game. I didn't look up handicaps. I don't even know if most of these guys have them or if they play them, but this is a question that Brian asked, so I'm going to answer it diligently, as always. First of all, Byron Cardwell is on this team, because when you run with the sort of patience and deliberance that he does, you have to be somebody who is methodical and thoughtful and very composed mentally, which is something you need to be a decent golfer. And, golf is also, seen as a very elitist sport. And, you have to be like, oh, this way, and you have to be all proper and whatnot. Not saying that Byron is not a cool dude, but that picture of him with his glasses on, he looks so ready to be like anything that he wants to be. Doctor, lawyer, president. I'm like, he just looks the part for someone who would travel in a sphere that plays a lot of golf. So I've got Byron Cardwell in there. Next is I've got Troy Franklin in the mix because I think he has the right mix of athletics of an athletic skill set to be able to make a good swing on the ball. He's not too tall to where he's, too lanky and awkward. Like I wouldn't want to put Dante Thornton in here because it's actually really hard to golf if you're 6'5" or make a good swing, but you also want to be a pretty good athlete and, a little bit of size and get you some more distance. So I like Troy Franklin in there as well. Talk about the need to be intellectual and analytical to be a golfer. How about AJ Abbott? Our backup quarterback, right? The walk-on that no one is talking about, of course, because he's, mostly going to be a practice squad guy in his career, and that's what he's been so far. But guy who has to study the playbook, guy has to, be able to sit down and think through stuff. And it just kind of feels that's just a feel thing. I'm thinking about what sort of positions would cater themselves to being a good golfer. I think 4-string quarterback is right up that alley. It just seems like it would be right. And then you got to have a long hitter. I wanted to put a long hitter into this mix. So I'm thinking about like, okay, who's going to be able to have the most club head speed? Who's got the best physical traits on the team? Probably Justin Flo. That's what I land. I'm not saying other guys couldn't hit it really far, but Flo is not, too tall to where it might be kind of, awkward or he'd be too lanky to swing, but we know he's powerful. He's explosive as an athlete. I bet you his club head speed would be as fast as anybody on the PGA Tour or on the Oregon golf team. Also, as I record this, Aaron Wise, former Oregon Duck, was, I think, 2 under today at the U.S. Open, and he's been playing some really nice golf out there on the links. So always love to see that from a former Duck on the PGA Tour. Thanks for making this your first listen. Go make Locked On Pac-12 your second. I'm hosting, talking about the Conference of Champions. I will probably be off on Monday, but should be back on, I might be back on, might not be back till Wednesday. We'll just have to wait and see, but I appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.